It all started with a phone call, a sterile, professional voice on the other end delivering a diagnosis that detonated my world. I had been terrified for weeks, watching my wife fade, convinced a terrible disease was stealing her from me. The truth, as it turned out, was far more cancerous to the soul. The doctor's words didn't confirm a sickness of the body, but a sickness in our marriage, a betrayal so profound it left me breathless. My first instinct was a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated rage, but as the initial shock subsided, a cold, calculating calm washed over me. She had written the script for our tragedy, but I would direct the final, explosive act. You think you know how this ends: a scorned husband, a messy divorce, a bitter goodbye. Think again. What I uncovered next, and what I planned in the shadows of my grief, changed everything. Before diving in, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Have you ever dealt with betrayal? Let's hear your stories. Part 1, The Unspoken Fear. For 22 years, Sarah had been the rhythm of my life. The steady beat I woke up to, the gentle hum that lulled me to sleep. We were a team, Mark and Sarah, the couple everyone pointed to as making it. We built a life in a quiet Ohio suburb, raised 2 kids who were now successfully launched into their own orbits, and settled into that comfortable, predictable groove of middle age. I was a project manager for a construction firm, a job that demanded long hours but paid the bills and then some. I built things that were meant to last, foundations of concrete and steel. I thought my marriage was built of the same stuff. The fear started subtly, a shadow creeping in at the edges of our comfortable life. Around 6 months ago, Sarah, who had always been a whirlwind of energy, started to slow down. She was a successful real estate agent, a job that thrived on her natural charisma, but the spark in her eyes had dimmed. It began with fatigue. "Just a long week, hun," she'd say, waving off my concern as she collapsed onto the sofa after work, too tired for our usual walk or even to share details of her day. Then came the other symptoms, small but persistent. She complained of aches, of a strange, recurring rash on her back, of a general malaise she couldn't shake. My mind, ever the pragmatist, jumped to the worst possible conclusions. At 48, she was in the demographic for a host of terrifying illnesses. I'd lie awake at night, my back to her, listening to her breathing, my imagination a torture chamber of tumors and incurable diseases. I'd picture life without her, a bleak, silent landscape, and a cold dread would seize me. I became her caregiver, her warrior-in-chief. I'd make her herbal tea, draw her lavender-scented baths, and rub her aching shoulders. "You need to see Dr. Evans," I'd urge, my voice tight with anxiety. "It's nothing, Mark, I'm just getting older," she'd reply, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. There was a distance in her gaze that had nothing to do with physical pain. She started spending more time on her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "Just keeping up with new listings," she'd explain, angling the screen away. She became fiercely protective of her privacy, something that was new for us. We'd always been an open book. Her appearance changed too. She bought new clothes, lingerie that I never saw, and started wearing a new perfume, a heavy, musky scent that was a departure from her usual light, floral fragrance. When I complimented her, she'd offer a brittle smile and say, "A woman's got to keep things fresh, right?" I, in my love-blinded worry, interpreted it all through the lens of her potential illness. Maybe she's trying to feel alive, to feel like herself again, I reasoned. I saw it as a brave defiance against the mysterious sickness that was draining the life from her. The irony is so thick now, I could choke on it. I finally convinced her to see the doctor. She went alone, insisting she was a big girl and didn't need me to hold her hand. The waiting was agony. The day she went for a full battery of tests, I was a wreck at work, unable to focus on blueprints or budgets. All I could see was her face, etched with a worry that I thought mirrored my own. We were in this together, facing this terrifying unknown, or so I believed. The love I felt for her in those moments was overwhelming, a fierce, protective wave. I would have fought dragons for her. Turns out the dragon was already inside the castle. Part 2, the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office, a glass box overlooking a half-finished construction site, the air thick with the smell of sawdust and rain. I was staring at a spreadsheet, the numbers blurring into meaningless squiggles, when my phone buzzed. The caller ID read Suburban Medical Group. My heart seized. This was it, the results. I snatched the phone, my palms sweating. "This is Mark Peterson." Mr. Peterson, this is Dr. Evans. I have the results of Sarah's tests. Is she with you? His voice was calm, professional, but held a note of something I couldn't quite place. Gravity, perhaps. No, she's with a client. I can take the information, I said, my voice barely a whisper. My throat was dry. I braced myself for the words, malignant, aggressive, inoperable. There was a slight pause on the other end. Mark, I usually discuss these matters directly with the patient, but Sarah listed you as fully authorized to receive her medical information. And given the nature of the results, well, perhaps it's best you hear it first. Just tell me, doctor, please. I squeezed my eyes shut. Physically, Sarah is in good health, he began, and a sliver of relief pierced my terror. Her blood work is mostly normal, no markers for cancer, no signs of any chronic autoimmune disorders. I exhaled, my body slumping in the chair. Oh, thank God, so what is it? A virus, an infection? It is an infection, doctor. Evans confirmed, his tone shifting. Mark, the tests came back positive for chlamydia. The word hung in the air, alien and obscene. Chlamydia, it didn't compute. It was a word from health class posters, from jokes about college dorms. It had nothing to do with my life, with my 22-year marriage to Sarah. I don't understand, I stammered, my brain refusing to process the information. There must be a mistake, a mix-up at the lab. We ran the panel twice, Mark. It's conclusive, the doctor said gently. The symptoms she's been experiencing, the fatigue, the aches, the skin irritation, are all consistent with a persistent, untreated STI. The good news is that it's completely treatable with a course of antibiotics. We'll need you to come in for testing as well as a precaution. His voice faded into a dull roar in my ears. A precaution. He thought I might have it too. He thought she might have gotten it from me. A cold, sharp clarity cut through my confusion. I hadn't been with another woman since I met Sarah in 1999. Not once. The fidelity of our marriage was the one bedrock truth I had never, ever questioned. If I didn't give it to her, there was only one other possibility. My worst fears had been confirmed, just not the ones I was expecting. I hadn't been afraid of losing my wife to a disease. I had been afraid of losing our life together, and in that single clinical word, chlamydia, I realized I already had. The woman I had been worried sick over, the woman I would have died for, didn't have cancer. She had a secret. She had a lover. The spreadsheet on my computer screen swam before my eyes. All her symptoms, her fatigue, her distance, her new perfume, the secretive phone calls, they weren't signs of a tragic illness. They were signs of an affair. The pieces of the puzzle didn't just fall into place, they slammed together with the force of a wrecking ball. The exhaustion wasn't from a failing body, but from the effort of living a double life. The musky new perfume wasn't for me, it was to cover the scent of another man. I mumbled a thank you to the doctor and hung up the phone. I sat there in my glass box, staring out at the skeleton of a building, a monument of steel and concrete, strong, lasting, a complete and utter lie. A wave of nausea rolled over me, followed by an anger so hot and pure it felt like I had swallowed molten steel. The fear was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous, certainty. Part 3, the long drive home. The 30-minute drive from my office to our house felt like a journey across a foreign planet. The familiar landmarks, the gas station on the corner, the old oak tree with the tire swing, the "Welcome to Northwood" sign, all seemed alien, artifacts from a life that had belonged to someone else. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles were white mountains on a pale landscape. My project manager brain, the part of me that compartmentalizes chaos and builds critical paths, was screaming, but my heart was just a hollow, echoing chamber. Every song on the radio was a bitter mockery. A love song about eternal devotion, a breakup anthem about a cheating lover. I turned it off, but the silence was worse, filled only by the frantic whirring of my thoughts. Flashbacks ambushed me, unbidden and cruel. Sarah on our wedding day, her eyes sparkling with what I had sworn was genuine love. Sarah, exhausted but radiant, holding our newborn son. Us just last year on a trip to the coast, holding hands on the beach, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. Had it all been a lie? When did it start? Was any of it real? The self-doubt was a venomous serpent coiling in my gut. Was it my fault? I worked long hours, I knew that. I'd come home tired, my mind still on deadlines and supply chain issues. Maybe I had become boring, predictable, the steady provider who forgot to be the passionate lover. I thought I was building a secure future for us, but maybe I was just building a cage she desperately wanted to escape. The sting of that thought was sharper than the betrayal itself. It wasn't just that she had cheated, it was that I might have been the reason why. Then the anger would surge back, a cleansing fire. I had given her everything, my loyalty, my body, my future. While I was lying awake at night, sick with worry that she was dying, she was in another man's bed. While I was making her tea and rubbing her feet, she was carrying his filth inside her. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that started in my chest and spread to my face. Who was he? The question hammered at me. Was it someone I knew, a neighbor, a colleague, a client she was meeting after hours? My mind scrolled through a gallery of faces. Was it Greg from the tennis club with his perfect teeth and vapid compliments? Or maybe that slick developer Brad who always held her arm a little too long at company parties? By the time I pulled into our driveway, a cold, hard resolve had settled over the chaos in my mind. I was not going to crash and burn. I was not going to scream and throw things. That was not who I was. I build things. I solve problems. And this was the most critical project of my life. My first instinct was to confront her, to watch her perfect facade crumble under the weight of the ugly truth. But what would that accomplish? Tears, denials, and a messy, protracted war where lawyers would be the only winners. No. That was too easy, too unsatisfying. She didn't deserve a quick, clean break. She deserved a reckoning. She had constructed an elaborate fantasy, a life built on deceit. I wouldn't just tear it down. I would be the architect of its implosion. I would let her keep building it higher and higher until it was so tall, so magnificent, that the fall would be utterly and completely devastating. I walked into the house, the smell of roasted chicken and rosemary filling the air, our home. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming along to some pop song on the radio. She turned as I entered, a bright, practiced smile on her face. "Hey hun, tough day?" she asked, wiping her hands on an apron. She was wearing a new silk blouse, her hair was perfect, and that musky perfume I now despised clung to her. She looked beautiful. She looked like a complete stranger. "You have no idea," I said, my voice eerily calm. I walked over, kissed her on the cheek, and tasted nothing but ash. For the first time, I looked into her eyes and saw not the woman I loved, but the adversary. The game had begun. And I was going to win. Part 4, a web of lies. I decided to wait. The rage inside me was a feral animal, but I locked it in a cage deep within my chest. For the next 2 days, I played the part of the loving, worried husband. I was attentive, kind, and observant. Every casual touch felt like a lie, every smile a performance. It was exhausting, but it was necessary. I needed to see the full scope of her deception before I made my move. The confrontation happened on a Thursday night. I had just finished the dishes while she sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, that same secretive smile playing on her lips. I had spent the day in a fugue state, my mind a whirlwind of pain and strategy. Now it was time. I dried my hands, leaned against the counter opposite her, and kept my voice level. I spoke with Dr. Evans on Tuesday. Her thumbs froze over the screen. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with an alarm she quickly tried to mask with concern. "Oh, why didn't you say anything? What did he say? Is everything okay?" "He told me your tests came back," I continued, watching her face intently. "He told me the good news, it's not cancer." A wave of what looked like genuine relief washed over her. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, placing a hand over her heart. "I was so scared, Mark. What is it then? Some kind of bacterial thing?" The casualness of her question, the sheer audacity of her performance was breathtaking. She was ready to play this out, to let me believe it was some random, unfortunate illness. "You could say that," I said, my voice hardening. "He said you have chlamydia." The name of the disease, spoken aloud in our clean, quiet kitchen, was a grenade. Her face went slack, the color draining from it. For a split second, I saw pure, unadulterated panic in her eyes. It was the look of a cornered animal. Then as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by a mask of indignant fury. "What?" she shrieked, her voice rising. "That's impossible. He must be wrong. That's a mistake. He said they ran the test twice, Sarah." She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Well, his lab is incompetent. I'm going to sue them. How dare they suggest something so vile?" I just stared at her, my silence a more potent accusation than any shout. I let her spin, let her dig the hole deeper, and for you to even repeat it, she spat, her finger pointing at me. For you to come in here and accuse me of that, after everything we've been through, here it came. The classic misdirection, the gaslighting, make me the villain for believing a doctor's medical report. The doctor also suggested I get tested, I said calmly, each word a carefully placed stone. Her eyes narrowed. A new, more venomous strategy was forming behind them. Well, maybe you should, she sneered. Maybe you should think long and hard about where you've been, Mark, all those late nights at the office. Those business trips, don't think I haven't wondered. It was a masterful stroke of cruelty. To take my years of dedication, the sacrifices I made for our family, and twist them into a weapon to use against me. In that moment, any lingering trace of love or pity I felt for her evaporated. The animal in the cage was roaring now. That's not going to work, Sarah, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. You and I both know I have never, ever been with anyone but you, so that leaves only one question. I took a step closer, invading her space. She recoiled slightly. Who is he? There is no one, she cried, tears welling in her eyes. They were magnificent tears, worthy of an Oscar. I can't believe you're doing this to me. I'm the one who's been sick, who's been terrified, and you turn it into this disgusting accusation. You're cruel. She brushed past me, a storm of righteous indignation, and ran up the stairs. A moment later, I heard our bedroom door slam shut. I stood alone in the kitchen, the smell of our dinner still hanging in the air. The silence was absolute. Her denial was more damning than any confession. It told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just a cheater, she was a ruthless, accomplished liar. She felt no remorse, only anger at being caught. She was ready to destroy me, my reputation, and my integrity to protect her sordid little secret. Fine, I thought, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time in days. If she wanted a war, she would get one. But this wouldn't be a war of screaming matches and slammed doors. It would be a quiet, meticulous campaign. I was a project manager, after all. And my new project was the complete and total demolition of Sarah Peterson's carefully constructed world. Part 5, The Architect of Ruin. The days following our confrontation were a masterclass in psychological warfare. We lived in the same house as two polite, Arctic strangers. We communicated through curt pleasantries and sticky notes on the refrigerator. Sarah was acting the part of the deeply wounded wife, martyred by her husband's cruel accusations. I played the role of the stoic, distant man she had supposedly pushed away, but beneath the surface of my calm exterior, I was a whirlwind of activity. My grief had crystallized into a diamond-hard purpose. My first step was to gather intelligence. I was a builder. I knew you couldn't demolish a structure without knowing its weak points. I started with her phone. She guarded it like a dragon protecting its hoard, but her arrogance was her undoing. She still used our shared family iPad, which was linked to her iMessage account. One night after she'd fallen asleep in a fog of feigned emotional exhaustion, and probably a glass or two of wine, I crept downstairs. There it was, a treasure trove of deceit. Months of messages to a contact named Chad. Of course his name was Chad. The messages were a sickening mix of cringeworthy pet names, explicit descriptions of their encounters, and most damningly, complaints about me. Mark is so predictable, one of her texts read. He thinks a stable life is the same as a passionate one. He has no idea what a real man's touch feels like. Another said, he's so worried about me, he thinks I'm dying. It's almost sweet, in a pathetic way. That one felt like a physical blow. They were laughing at me, laughing at my love, my fear. I screenshotted everything, my fingers moving with cold precision, and emailed the images to a new, secret account I'd created. I read on, my stomach churning. Chad was a wealth advisor she'd met through work. He was all about fitness, expensive cars, and living authentically. He was a walking cliché. They met at hotels in the back seats of cars, and this made my blood run cold in our house, on our bed, while I was on a business trip to Chicago. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed more. I needed to know the full extent of the damage. I logged into our joint credit card account. The paper trail was blatant. Lunches at fancy restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel charges from the Staywell Inn near the airport on afternoons she was supposedly showing properties across town. And a recurring charge that made my heart stop, payments to a high-end jewelry store. A few clicks and I found the item, a delicate gold bracelet with a single diamond charm. I had never seen it. It wasn't for her, it was for him, disguised as a gift for a client. My project management skills kicked into high gear. I created a timeline, a spreadsheet, dates, times, locations, expenses. I cross-referenced her work calendar with the text messages and credit card statements. The web of lies was intricate and breathtaking. She wasn't just having an affair, she was living an entirely separate life funded by our joint account. The rage was a constant hum beneath my skin, but I channeled it. It became my fuel. I consulted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Diana, who looked over my initial evidence with a grimly satisfied expression. "This is ironclad, Mark," she said, her glasses perched on her nose. "With this, we can bypass the standard 50-50 split. The financial infidelity alone is grounds for a significant judgment in your favor. We can prove she squandered marital assets." "It's not just about the money," I told her, my voice low. "I want her to understand the consequences of her actions. I want everyone to understand." Diana gave me a long, appraising look. "Public humiliation can be a messy tool, Mark. Are you prepared for the fallout?" "I'm a project manager," I replied. "I always account for collateral damage." Part 6, an unlikely alliance. My plan needed an inside source, an emotional component that went beyond digital records and financial statements. The perfect, unexpected ally came in the form of Sarah's younger sister, Chloe. Chloe had always been different from Sarah. Where Sarah was polished and socially ambitious, Chloe was down-to-earth, artistic, and possessed a fierce sense of loyalty that I'd always admired. She saw me as the stable, loving older brother she'd never had. We had a bond that I suspected Sarah sometimes resented. I called her and asked her to meet for coffee, telling her I was worried about Sarah's health and wanted to talk. We met at a small cafe halfway between our houses. Chloe's brow was furrowed with concern as she sat down. "Mark, I'm so glad you called," she said. "I've been worried sick. Sarah's been so different lately, secretive, almost brittle. Is it serious?" I took a deep breath. I could have lied, could have kept her in the dark, but looking into her honest, worried eyes, I knew the truth was the only way. I laid it all out for her, the doctor's call, the STI, the texts, the credit card statements. I didn't spare her the details. As I spoke, her expression shifted from concern to disbelief, then to a slow-burning anger that mirrored my own. "Chad," she finally whispered, her voice filled with disgust. "Chad Albright, that sleazy spray-tan parasite." She introduced him to me at a work function as her mentor. I knew there was something slimy about him. She clenched her fists on the table. "That bracelet, she told me she bought it for her top client as a thank you gift. I can't believe this. How could she do this to you, Mark, to her own family?" In that moment, Chloe became my co-conspirator. Her loyalty to her sister was fractured by the depth of the betrayal. She was furious not just for me, but for the sanctity of the family Sarah was desecrating. "What do you need?" she asked, her eyes hard. "Information," I said. "Sarah is planning a big party for our 25th anniversary next month. She's insisting on it. She's calling it a reaffirmation of our love. The irony is nauseating, but it's the perfect venue." Chloe understood immediately. "You're going to expose her," it wasn't a question. "I'm going to give a toast," I said, "and I need to make sure everyone is there, especially Chad." Chloe's lips curved into a grim smile. "Oh, he'll be there. Sarah's been trying to get him integrated into our lives, passing him off as a friend and financial advisor. She even invited him to the party. She told me she wanted him to see what a real, lasting love looks like. She is unbelievable." Over the next few weeks, Chloe became my eyes and ears. She'd report back on Sarah's conversations, her moods, her party planning. Sarah, completely oblivious, confided in her sister, complaining about my coldness and spinning a tale of a husband who had become emotionally distant and accusatory for no reason. She was building her own narrative, painting herself as the victim to anyone who would listen. Chloe's intel was invaluable. She confirmed that Chad would be attending the anniversary party. She also told me something that added another layer of sickening betrayal. Chad was married. His wife, a quiet, unassuming woman named Emily, apparently had no idea. My plan solidified. This wouldn't just be about exposing Sarah. It would be about delivering a precise, devastating dose of truth to everyone involved. The anniversary party would not be a celebration of our marriage. It would be its public autopsy. Part 7, the anniversary toast. The day of our 25th anniversary party arrived on a wave of cloying humidity. Our backyard had been transformed. White tents, fairy lights, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Sarah was in her element, gliding among our 80 guests like a queen in her court, dressed in a shimmering silver gown. She looked radiant, every bit the happy, successful wife celebrating a lifetime of love. Anyone looking at us would have seen the perfect couple. They would have been so wrong. I moved through the crowd, a ghost at my own feast. I accepted congratulations, smiled at old friends, and shook hands, all while the cold, hard knot of my plan sat heavy in my stomach. I saw Chad Albright across the lawn. He was exactly as I'd pictured, tall, artificially tanned, teeth too white, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He was holding a glass of champagne and laughing with a group of Sarah's real estate colleagues. He caught my eye and gave me a confident, condescending nod, the kind of gesture a man gives to another man he considers utterly irrelevant. Chloe found me by the bar. "Are you ready for this?" she whispered, her eyes anxious. "Ready as I'll ever be," I said, my hand tightening around the microphone I was holding. Sarah, ever the gracious hostess, tapped a glass with a spoon, calling for everyone's attention. "Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate 25 wonderful years with my amazing husband, Mark," she gushed, beaming at me. The crowd applauded. "Mark has always been my rock, my foundation. And now I think he has a few words he'd like to say." She handed the moment to me, a perfect, glittering gift of self-destruction. I walked to the center of the patio, the faces of our friends and family turned toward me. I saw my son and daughter in the front, their faces proud. A pang of guilt hit me, this would hurt them too. But the truth, however painful, was better than a lie. I cleared my throat. "Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all for being here. 25 years, a quarter of a century, it's a long time to build a life with someone." I started slowly, conventionally. I spoke about our early years, the struggles, the triumphs. I talked about raising our kids, the pride we felt. I could see Sarah preening, soaking it all in. Chad looked bored, checking his Rolex. "A successful marriage, like a successful building project," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "is all about the foundation. It requires honesty, integrity, and transparency. You can't have secrets. You can't have hidden rot, because eventually the entire structure will become compromised." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Sarah's smile tightened just a fraction. "For the past 6 months," I said, my eyes locking onto hers, "I thought our foundation was being threatened by an illness." Sarah was tired, she was in pain, and I was terrified. I thought I was going to lose her. Her face softened into a look of saccharine sympathy for the benefit of our audience. So you can imagine my relief when the doctor called with her test results. "It wasn't cancer," I paused, letting the silence hang in the humid air. "He told me she had chlamydia." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Sarah's face turned the color of chalk. Her smile vanished, replaced by a rictus of horror. "Now I know what you're thinking," I said, my voice ringing with cold clarity. "And no, it wasn't from me. My test came back negative, which led me on a project of my own, a little investigation. And I have to thank my wife for being so meticulous. She left a wonderful paper trail. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a stack of papers, like this, for instance, a printout of texts. Messages to a man named Chad. I looked directly at him now. His tan couldn't hide the sudden pallor of his skin. They're quite poetic. My favorite is the one where Sarah calls me predictable and pathetic for worrying about her health. I continued, my voice a relentless hammer. And then there are the credit card statements, so many romantic lunches. So many afternoons at the Staywell Inn near the airport. It's a wonder she had any time to sell houses at all. Sarah was frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. People were whispering, staring, backing away from her as if her betrayal were contagious. "But this," I said, holding up the final piece of paper, a printout from a jewelry store website, "this is the masterstroke. A beautiful gold bracelet, a gift paid for with our money." I was confused at first because I'd never seen Sarah wear it. Then I realized it wasn't for her. I walked through the stunned crowd until I was standing in front of a woman I had never met, a woman with kind, confused eyes who was standing next to Chad. "You must be Emily," I said gently. "My name is Mark Peterson. I believe this belongs to you." I handed her the printout. "Your husband has been sleeping with my wife. That bracelet he gave you for your anniversary last month, my wife paid for it. Emily stared at the paper, then at her husband, her face crumbling in slow-motion devastation. Chad looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. I turned back to face the crowd, to face my wife. She was shaking, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. So, yes, I said, my voice filling the dead silence. Here's to 25 years. To a marriage of lies, to a foundation of deceit, and to the ugly, necessary truth that sometimes the only way to fix a rotten structure is to burn it to the ground. Please enjoy the shrimp cocktail. I dropped the microphone. It hit the stone patio with a loud, satisfying thud that echoed the sound of a life imploding. And then I walked away. Part 8, the scent of perfume and betrayal. As I walked away from the epicenter of the explosion I had created, a strange calm settled over me. The shocked silence behind me slowly gave way to a cacophony of murmurs, gasps, and the first rising notes of hysteria. I didn't turn back. I kept walking past the beautifully arranged flower displays and the hired string quartet who had wisely stopped playing. Chloe caught up to me at the edge of the lawn. Her face was a mixture of awe and concern. "Mark, that was biblical," she breathed. "It was necessary," I replied, my voice hoarse. Suddenly a shriek cut through the air. "Mark, you bastard." Sarah was storming toward me, her face a grotesque mask of fury, her silver dress looking like armor on a fallen warrior. Chad was nowhere to be seen. He had evaporated into the crowd, a coward to the very end. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "In front of everyone, our friends, our children." "You mean the friends you lied to, the children you betrayed?" I shot back, my calm beginning to fray. "You're not angry that you did it, Sarah. You're just angry that everyone knows there's a difference." Our son, Jake, and daughter, Mia, were now approaching, their faces pale and stricken. They had heard everything. "Mom, Dad, what is going on?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. Before I could answer, Sarah rounded on them. "Your father is trying to destroy me. He's making up insane, horrible lies." It was her last, desperate gamble to paint me as a madman, but I had the receipts, both literally and figuratively. And then Emily, Chad's wife, walked slowly toward our little group. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear, and she held a quiet dignity that Sarah, in her frantic rage, had completely lost. She stopped in front of Sarah. "The perfume," Emily said, her voice quiet but carrying an immense weight. "He started coming home smelling of it months ago. He told me it was a new air freshener they were using at his gym." She looked at Sarah with a gaze that held no hatred, only a profound and weary pity. "It's your perfume, isn't it? The one you're wearing right now." That one small, sensory detail did what my entire speech could not. It made it real in a way that bank statements and text messages never could. The musky, cloying scent that had been a harbinger of this disaster. Sarah had no answer. She simply stared, her lies finally exhausted, her defenses shattered by the simple, undeniable truth of a scent. She finally looked at me, her eyes pleading for a brief moment, as if hoping I would call it all back, reverse time, and undo the devastation. I just shook my head. The man who would have done that, the man who would have forgiven her anything, was gone. She had killed him. I turned to my children. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We'll talk later. I promise I will explain everything." I gave Chloe a final, grateful nod, and then I walked through the side gate, away from the wreckage of my home, and I didn't look back. The party was over. Part 9, the ashes of a marriage. The aftermath was as messy and brutal as one would expect. The divorce was a war of attrition. Sarah, guided by a piranha of a lawyer, tried every dirty trick in the book. She claimed emotional abuse. She tried to paint me as a controlling husband. She even attempted to say my public reveal was proof of my instability. But Diana, my lawyer, was a master tactician. At every turn, she met their accusations with cold, hard facts. The screenshots, the bank statements, the sworn affidavit from Chloe. The final nail in Sarah's legal coffin was a deposition from a former colleague of hers who admitted to knowing about the affair and had even covered for her on several occasions. In the end, the judge saw through the charade. Citing her egregious financial infidelity and the calculated nature of her deceit, he awarded me a settlement that was far from the 50-50 split she had expected. I got the house I had built and maintained, the house she had defiled. I got the majority of our savings, the ones she hadn't managed to squander on her lover. It wasn't a victory. There are no victors in such wars. But it was justice. The social fallout was equally swift. The story of the anniversary party became the stuff of suburban legend. Friends we had known for decades took sides. Some pitied Sarah, seeing her as a woman who had made a mistake and been punished too cruelly. But most, especially those who had witnessed her gaslighting and lies firsthand, sided with me. They saw the betrayal for what it was. My relationship with my children was the most difficult part to navigate. They were hurt and confused, caught in the crossfire of a war they hadn't started. There were tense phone calls and difficult conversations. They loved their mother, but they couldn't ignore the truth of what she had done. It took time, therapy, and a lot of patience, but slowly, we began to rebuild our relationships on a new foundation of difficult honesty. They saw that my actions, however dramatic, had come from a place of deep pain and a need for the truth to be known. As for Sarah, her world collapsed. Chad, predictably, had left his wife, but not for Sarah. He had simply moved on to his next conquest, leaving 2 broken families in his wake. Sarah lost her reputation. Her high-flying real estate career took a nosedive, and she was forced to move into a small apartment across town. I occasionally saw her from a distance at the grocery store or the gas station. She looked smaller, diminished, the vibrant confidence she once wore like a designer coat now replaced by a shroud of bitterness. I felt no pity. I felt nothing at all. Part 10, Building a New Foundation. The first few months after the divorce were quiet. The house, once filled with the noise of a family, was silent. At first, the silence was deafening, a constant reminder of my loss. I'd walk through the rooms, half expecting to see Sarah walk around a corner, and the grief would hit me all over again. But slowly, something began to shift. The silence became peaceful. The emptiness became space for me. I started reclaiming my life piece by piece. I took up old hobbies I had abandoned for the sake of work and family. I dusted off my old guitar and started playing again, the calluses slowly returning to my fingertips. I joined a weekend hiking club, trading blueprints and spreadsheets for trail maps and the smell of pine. I reconnected with old friends, men I had lost touch with amidst the demands of marriage and fatherhood. One Saturday, while working in the yard, I realized I was humming. It struck me that I hadn't genuinely hummed, hadn't felt that baseline level of contentment in years. I had been so focused on being a provider, a husband, a problem solver, that I had forgotten how to just be Mark. I wasn't just demolishing a life built on lies, I was clearing the ground for a new one. I took on a new project at work, a challenging, innovative design for a community library. I poured my energy into it not as an escape, but as an act of creation. Building something positive, something for the future, felt deeply cathartic. I haven't started dating. I'm not ready for that yet. But for the first time in a long time, the future doesn't look like a bleak, empty landscape. It looks like an open road. The betrayal was the most painful experience of my life, a fire that burned everything I knew to the ground. But now, standing in the ashes, I'm finding that some things grow back stronger. The other night, my daughter Mia came over for dinner. We sat on the back patio, the same patio where I had detonated my old life, and we just talked. We laughed. She told me she was proud of me, not for the revenge, but for what came after, for the way I was rebuilding. As she left, she gave me a hug and said, "It's good to see you again, Dad," and I realized she was right. I was finally seeing myself again, too. The foundation was new, it was smaller, and it was mine alone, but it was solid, and it was ready for whatever I wanted to build next. If this story hit home, like and subscribe for more gripping tales of love and betrayal. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive or seek revenge? Was my toast at the party a moment of epic justice or a step too far? I read all your comments. Check out the next video popping up now for another twist-filled saga.